Hello, this is State Controller Tom DiNapoli. Welcome to the Office of State Controller's 10th Annual Lunar New Year celebration. Given the environment that we're in, we're doing this in a virtual environment. We'll look forward to the day when we can do these celebrations in person once again. But certainly, I think we're all ready for a celebration, and Lunar New Year is certainly worthy of our getting together. Certainly to acknowledge the contributions of the Pan-Asian community in New York and beyond, and recognize that we're all looking forward to a better year. We also take the opportunity with these events to acknowledge community leaders who are making such a big difference in our city and in our state and in our nation. And we have some wonderful honorees today that I'll be acknowledging in a few moments. So as part of the welcome, let me say ni hao, annyeong haseyo, sin chao. I hope I did hello reasonably well, given my struggling with English, let alone with other languages. And I'll say gung hei fa choi, Happy New Year, Happy Lunar New Year, Happy Year of the Tiger this year. And I believe we have a artistic presentation that we're going to see right now. How about those lion dancers? Thank you to the Chinese Theater Works for that great performance. Lunar New Year is the time to spotlight the contributions made by the Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and the entire Pan-Asian community to New York City, New York State, and our nation. They say the tiger is associated with bravery, courage, confidence, vitality, and strength, all important attributes as we continue to recover from the challenges of this unprecedented time of the pandemic. Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and other Pan-Asian immigrants have made an indelible mark throughout our great state of New York. And new arrivals continue to help revitalize neighborhoods across New York City and beyond, from Flushing, Murray Park, Whitestone, and Queens, to Chinatown and Lower East Side in Manhattan, to Sunset Park, Windsor Terrace, and Bensonhurst in Brooklyn. Greater Flushing, where I was just at for FCBA's Lunar New Year Parade. Greater Flushing, as we all know, is the heart of Queens' vibrant Chinese community, Chinese, Korean, and Asian community, and certainly one of the city's most dynamic ethnic neighborhoods. Its revival over the past 20 years has been spearheaded by Chinese, Korean, and other Asian immigrants. As many of you know, we put out reports on the economic activity of various neighborhoods across New York City, and we did a report back in December of 2021 on Greater Flushing. It really was an update of a report that we had done, I guess it was close to 10 years earlier. And that December 2021 report showed that from the years 2000 to 2019, total businesses in the Greater Flushing area grew by close to 82%, faster than the growth in Queens County or New York City at large. Private sector employment grew by over 70% in the same period, double the growth rate in Queens or in New York City. Certainly the COVID-19 pandemic took a heavy toll on Greater Flushing, as it has done for so many of our neighborhoods. But what we also saw when we announced the report in December is that jobs were coming back to the Greater Flushing area faster than they were coming back and recovering compared to other neighborhoods in New York City. Certainly a positive sign, not only for Greater Flushing and for Queens, but for all of us. So once again, we see that entrepreneurship, that economic vitality in Greater Flushing is really leading the way and really is a model of effective business success, and particularly smaller businesses, really something to be heralded and recognized. So as we all know, we're coming through a very difficult 2 years because of the impact of COVID-19. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we have in our office highlighted the industry sectors and the communities which have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And that includes impact on the Asian American community in New York. We did a report in January of this year on one particular sector, or series of sectors on New York City's restaurants and retail sectors. And what do we find? We found that close to 170,000 fewer jobs were in that part of our economy in November of 2021 compared to 2 years earlier. In fact, 41% of the total private sector jobs that were lost in New York City during COVID-19 occurred in that restaurant and retail sector. Restaurant job losses have had an outsized impact on the Asian community. 20% of restaurant workers across New York City are Asian, including 56% in Chinatown and the Lower East Side in Manhattan, 61% in Sunset Park, Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn, 77% in Flushing, Murray Park, Whitestone, and Queens. But as we celebrate this year's Lunar New Year, there is hope. The Omicron variant appears to be quickly receding in New York City and New York State. We can be optimistic that public health and economic environment may soon be dramatically improved. And certainly that I expect will benefit not only our restaurant and retail sectors, but all of our business community and our nonprofit sector as well, that has been hit so hard by the pandemic. Certainly government, whether it's at the city level, the state level, or the federal level, must continue to support our businesses and nonprofits as we get into a recovery mode. When we look at restaurants, retail, and small businesses, the backbone of our economy, that government aid has really been so essential. It needs to continue to be there if this recovery will be sustained. You know, while we have a sense of optimism on where we're at with economic recovery and hopefully with the public health numbers getting better, we also have to recognize one of the other, troubling aspects of the times that we live in. And that's certainly, we have to comment on the dramatic rise in anti-Asian hate and bigotry that we've seen across the country. And certainly New York has not been left out of that. Obviously, from my perspective, it's fueled and amplified by ignorance, by anger, some of it triggered by COVID-19. According to Stop AAPI Hate, there were 10,370 hate incidents against Asian American and Pacific Islander persons reported in the United States of America from March 19, 2020 to September 30, 2021. We know that closer to home in New York, the NYPD's year-end hate crime statistics for 2021, those reports show anti-Asian attacks increased by 343%, 343% increase from 30 such incidents in 2020 to 133 in 2021. This is all very troubling. We must, together with a united voice, continue to push back against these hateful xenophobic attacks and continue to stand together as one community. Now more than ever, we must remember that in the United States of America, and especially in New York, we really all are immigrants. We all have our personal stories, and in my case, it's my grandparents were the immigrants, but immigrants and people coming from other places is what's made New York the great city and state that it is, and has contributed so much to the United States of America. So this effort to label people as other or somehow not be welcome is just un-American, certainly un-New York. Our city and our nation was built and strengthened by people from all races, cultures, backgrounds, and religions, literally from all over the world. The best path forward for a stronger New York City, New York State, United States of America as well, is unleashing everyone's potential and using all of our talents. And really, we must do more to ensure that we have a more caring and inclusive society. And I think that's what New York has always been about. We don't want to go backwards in that regard. So, as I said, in celebrating Lunar New Year, we're not only happily being part of a wonderful tradition that our Asian neighbors have invited us to be a part of, but it is an opportunity to recognize the contributions of the Pan-Asian community to our success as a community. And, we do that by acknowledging leaders who have made a big difference in the community. And as I said at the outset, we're honoring 4 individuals today, different stories, different endeavors that they've been part of, but all wonderful success stories and worthy of acknowledgement. And I'm really delighted that each of them would allow us to put a spotlight on them and have us acknowledge their wonderful, wonderful success and contributions. So what I'm going to do now is acknowledge each of our honorees one by one. I'll do a little intro and bio, and then we'll let each of them say a few words. So let's start off with Kevin D. Kim, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business Services. Kevin Kim is the son of immigrant parents, a product of New York City public schools, and a graduate of Stanford University and Columbia University. An attorney and an entrepreneur who co-founded the company that created the ABAKids program to help students improve their mental math skills. Kevin served as the first Asian American commissioner of the State Liquor Authority from 2014 to 2016, and was appointed by Mayor Eric Adams in 2022 to lead the Small Business Services Department for New York City. In addition to his work with SBS, which promotes equitable opportunity and small business success throughout the 5 boroughs of New York, Kevin is a member of the CUNY Board of Trustees, that's City University of New York, and of President Biden's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. He has served on numerous boards, including the Korean American Association of Greater New York, the Korean American Community Foundation, and the Asian American Bar Association. Kevin, in acknowledging you, I will show, as we have one of these for each of our honorees, and we will have this delivered to you. I won't read all the whereases, but this is a small way for us to honor you by presenting this proclamation from the Comptroller's office. And it really summarizes in brief your incredible achievements and all that you're doing. So Kevin, I join with all the people of New York in thanking you for your efforts, congratulating you on your outstanding service, and certainly wishing you continued success, fulfillment, and happiness. So Kevin, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Comptroller DiNapoli. I just first want to begin by thanking you for all the years of friendship and leadership that you've shown to the Asian American community, and just by hosting a forum like this to recognize the contributions of Asian Americans in the last decade. And this is your 10th annual Lunar New Year celebration. So it's truly an honor to be a part of the celebration with my fellow honorees who are prime examples of Asian Americans who've risen to leadership roles in various industries and various communities. So I want to thank you for that, first and foremost. To everyone else, Gongshi Fachai, Gonghe Fachoy, and 새해 복 많이 받으십시오. It's really an honor to be here again today. Last month, Mayor Eric Adams appointed me Commissioner of New York City Small Business Services. And that appointment for me is not just another job, it has personal significance. As Comptroller DiNapoli mentioned, my parents immigrated here from South Korea in 1975. They came with very little, started a small business. My mother was an artificial flower designer, and my father would take her design flowers and go door to door in the garment district until they were able to build up a small business. So for me, just watching them be able to take this business and then provide the economic opportunities, the education opportunities for me and my sister is something that will stay with me forever. And so in this role, I'm just really proud to be able to try to give that same opportunity to all the small business owners in New York City. At SBS, we are really dedicated to just helping businesses operate, grow, and thrive. And we're also here to help people find jobs. And people don't realize, but SBS, we have 18 workforce centers around the city just to train people and connect them, not just to jobs, but to careers, hopefully life-changing careers. And finally, we also work with all the business improvement districts and the local neighborhood chambers and community boards to help neighborhood commercial corridors thrive as well. So, you know, I'm just honored to be here. I think at SBS, the main lens we try to look at things is equity. And as Comptroller DiNapoli has been a champion of equity in his entire career, that's what we're trying to do here in terms of bringing the city back stronger and more resilient than ever before. So again, thank you. This is truly an honor, and I congratulate my fellow honorees as well.
Thank you, Kevin. That was great. And certainly from my perspective, again, as we get into this mode of recovery, small businesses are going to lead the way out. And the kind of support you're providing, you know, with the backing of Mayor Adams is going to be essential in that regard. And anything we could do to help you with those efforts. You know, we sometimes folks don't realize we help to underwrite small business loans through Pursuit Lending and some other programs with our pension fund. So we should follow up with you and see how we could, you know, coordinate those kinds of efforts. So thank you for everything you're doing, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Next, I'm very pleased to honor Prisca Bae, Vice President and Head of Partnerships at the Asian American Foundation. A South Korean native, Prisca grew up in Chicago and graduated from Columbia University and the University of California at Berkeley. An attorney and diversity advocate who has managed Goldman Sachs Gives, directed the Women in the World Foundation, advised Seneca Women, and served as Senior Vice President at PepsiCo, where she oversaw the company's Gender Diversity and Engagement Center of Excellence prior to joining TAAF in 2021. And TAAF is the Asian American Foundation. Currently, she serves as Vice President and Head of Partnerships with that foundation, a philanthropic organization that supports Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in their pursuit of belonging and prosperity. In addition to her work at the Asian American Foundation, Prisca serves on the boards of the Korean American Community Foundation and Columbia's Double Discovery Center, which helps low-income New York students succeed in college. Community stakeholders appreciate her strategic expertise and her commitment to building a truly inclusive society. Prisca, you do a lot, you've done a lot, and you're doing a lot, and I join with all the people of New York in thanking you for everything that you continue to do for your outstanding service. And we have one of these proclamations for you as well. So Prisca Bae, I turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Lunar New Year and happy Black History Month. Thank you so much, Comptroller DiNapoli, for bringing us together. And thank you to my fellow honorees and to everyone in the virtual audience. I know we have a lot going on these days, so I'm grateful that everyone is zooming in. My name is Prisca Bae, and it is truly an honor to be with you today. I'll start by sharing a sentiment that my Korean mother often says to me: do everything that I wasn't able to do. And for many immigrants and children of immigrants, we know exactly what this means. And I'd like to share some things that I've done that my mother and my father have not been able to, not for lack of talent or smarts or heart, but simply due to lack of opportunity. I went to college, Columbia University, where I became a New Yorker. I went to law school because I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be an advocate for my family and my community. I worked for the US government and in politics because I knew that being at the seat of power was important. And I pursued a career in diversity because I believe that we all belong in the room and at the table. However, notable in my experiences, I did not see many Asian American leaders at the table. Our issues were also not on the agenda, and our causes were often not in budgets, which is why I was excited to help launch the Asian American Foundation last May. The Asian American Foundation was founded by an incredible group of leaders to build the infrastructure needed to improve AAPI advocacy, power, and representation across American society. And in the lead up to our launch, we were struck by one statistic. Asian American community organizations had been receiving less than 0.5% of philanthropic dollars over the last 30 years nationally. So in response to this persistent underfunding of our community, we launched the AAPI Giving Challenge and asked over 100 companies and foundations a very simple question. What are you doing to support AAPI communities and causes? And will you commit that support over 5 years? And one by one, we were able to bring in partners from all sectors: P&G, Nike, Walmart, JP Morgan, and in just 6 weeks, we captured over 1 billion in commitments for our community. It was clear that we were in the midst of a movement, and do not get me wrong, most companies admitted that they should be doing more. But that was and is okay, as this movement is just getting started. And so with that, I am asking each and every one of you joining us today, let's not lose momentum. Let's continue to ask our leaders and institutions what they are doing to support our community. And while the challenge focused on companies and foundations, I'd love to bring cities and states to the table. And I look forward to speaking to each one of you in the coming weeks and having New York City and the state of New York join the Giving Challenge. Our goal is to not only unlock resources and drive impact for the AAPI community, but it's also to advance the overall promise of building a diverse and inclusive society for all. We believe that any progress for the Asian American community should be progress for all communities. So on behalf of the board of the Asian American Foundation, thank you so much for including me in this year's Lunar New Year celebration. Thank you so much.
Prisca, thank you. And thank you for giving us all a challenge and the opportunity to do more. Really appreciate that. And we'll look forward to working with you. Next, I'm very pleased that we can honor Dr. Anthony Shih, President of the United Hospital Fund. Dr. Shih was born in New York City to Taiwanese immigrant parents. He earned degrees from Amherst College, New York University, and Columbia University. Anthony embarked on a career in the nonprofit health sector, serving vulnerable populations and advancing public policy, holding senior executive positions with IPRO. IPRO is a quality improvement nonprofit, the Commonwealth Fund, and the New York Academy of Medicine. He took the helm at the United Hospital Fund in 2017. Under his leadership, the United Hospital Fund has undertaken new initiatives in pursuit of its mission to create a more effective and equitable healthcare system, including increased emphasis on child welfare and diversity. Dr. Shih also serves on New York City advisory councils, working to develop a post-pandemic recovery plan and to build a more just and resilient city. I had the chance in my time in the assembly to get to know the United Hospital Fund. Our former majority leader, Jim Talon, was there for many years. And anybody that's familiar with the work of the fund knows that in terms of really focusing on key issues, it has unbelievable credibility and really breaks new pathways in terms of how we could be smarter about how we're handling healthcare. And obviously, through the pandemic, we've learned even more so how important it is that we have not only quality healthcare, but access available to everyone. So Dr. Shih, you are in such a pivotal position with a very important organization, and your work is needed now more than ever. And, your incredible leadership is really valued by all of us. So, again, I join with all the people of New York in thanking you for your very important leadership, your outstanding service. Of course, we have for you one of these handsome proclamations as well that will go up there in your office, I hope. And obviously, we wish you continued success. So, Dr. Anthony Shih, I'll turn the platform over to you.
Thank you, Controller DiNapoli. Thank you for the kind introduction and this incredible honor. It's a privilege to be here among the other distinguished honorees, Commissioner Kim, Prisca Bae, and Eugene Noh. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you also, Controller, for your service to New York State. And I think it's wonderful that as one of our state's leaders, you host this Lunar New Year celebration each year, recognizing the importance of this holiday among many of the Asian cultures represented in New York. As you noted, my parents immigrated from Taiwan, and the New Year is certainly one of our most cherished family traditions. My first job as a physician was working for a community mental health clinic that served primarily Asian immigrants and refugees. That early experience in seeing the challenges that our patients or our community faced in accessing services, getting high quality care, and struggling with all the factors outside of healthcare that impacted their health and well-being was formative for my career. I now have the privilege of leading an organization, the United Hospital Fund, that works to address all of these issues at a system level. So we are an independent nonprofit founded in 1879, and we work to build an effective and equitable healthcare system for every New Yorker. Through research and policy analysis, our convening function, and our programs, we work to dismantle barriers in health policy and healthcare delivery that prevent equitable opportunities for health. These past 2 years have been challenging for our entire state. It's of course not just the direct morbidity and mortality of COVID-19, but the associated economic impact, and of course, the collective trauma to our mental health that has left virtually no one untouched. In this context, it can be hard to carve out time to celebrate, but we are resilient as New Yorkers, and I'm glad we're celebrating the Lunar New Year together. Thank you again to Controller DiNapoli for this honor, to my fellow honorees, my colleagues at United Hospital Fund, and a special thanks to my loving and caring family at home. May the year of the tiger bring us all peace, health, and happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, and we will continue to look for that great policy and research work that the United Hospital Fund is so well known for. I didn't realize 1879, you said, was the year it was founded. Incredible. Wish you continued success in each and every way. And now I'm very pleased to honor Eugene Noh, Political Director of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU. Eugene is a Queens native, the son of parents who came to New York from South Korea. He became active in politics and energized by the goal of strengthening the voice of Asian Americans in our government while he was still in high school. I can relate to that. Eugene served as an intern for City Council member John Liu, who also was my counterpart in the controller world, right, Eugene, when John was New York City controller, and now he's a very distinguished member of the New York State Senate. Eugene went on to participate in all of John Liu's subsequent campaigns, as well as working with Congressman Max Rose, Assemblyman Ron Kim, and Council member Margaret Chin, all great and noted Asian elected officials. He recently managed Council member Julie Wan's successful campaign. We should note, as an aside, that Eugene and Julie share not just a political or professional relationship, but a personal one as well. And I'm sure your successful effort in managing that campaign only strengthened that wonderful relationship. Eugene is currently the political director of RWDSU. This union represents some 60,000 workers in a wide range of industries and is affiliated with the UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers Union, and the AFL-CIO. Eugene is responsible for managing the union's legislative and political agenda. In his work with RWDSU, Eugene is committed to protecting workers' rights, promoting economic security, defending democracy, and helping to build a robust, inclusive, and sustainable prosperity. You know, from my point of view, Eugene, and I've said this many times, and it's even more true now with what we're going through, if we are going to have economic security in our society broadly distributed, we have to have strong unions. I mean, the unions really did build up the middle class. You know, my own family's history was, you know, the immigrant grandparents and parents were successful in living their version of the American dream because they were part of strong unions. My dad was a communication worker, shop steward, and my mom was a civil service worker represented by CSEA. And growing up, I saw firsthand the economic security that our family enjoyed was because of the fact that my parents were in jobs that were protected by strong unions. So at a time when the middle class has been threatened, that was true before the pandemic set in, and even more pressure now. It's at the same time that our unions are under great pressure. And fortunately, we live in a state that's certainly more union friendly. And I think the latest numbers still have New York as the state with the highest percentage of unionized workforce. But, you know, from my point of view, Eugene, what you are doing is so fundamental to a secure economic future and really prosperity for everyone. And I really admire the fact that you've chosen leadership within the union movement to be where you're putting your creative talents and energies. So certainly this proclamation is also a small way of recognizing the great work that you're doing. And it really is my privilege to honor you and to turn the program over to you right now.
Thank you so much, Controller DiNapoli, for such a warm introduction. I don't think anybody has ever introduced me in such a kind way my entire life. So thank you very much. So I'm Eugene Noh, I'm the political director for the RWDSU. And it's an honor to be here and to be honored here with the other honorees here, especially someone like Kevin Kim, whom I've known since I was in high school. In fact, my wife and I did knock doors for his city council campaign all those years ago as well. The reason that I had started working in politics and didn't go on to get my law degree or to get a medical degree, other than the fact that I'm limited by my intelligence, I was inspired by a certain former council member who represented Flushing. I'll just kind of read some of her words now. She said back in '96, "I don't know if they're Korean or Chinese. I can't tell by the name. They're more like colonizers and immigrants. They sure as hell had a lot of money, and they sure as hell know how to buy property and jack up rents at retail shops and drive people out. The money came first, the paupers followed, smuggled in and built by their own kind." Later on, this council member, Julia Harrison, went on to add that Asian Americans would never have their own seat, not in the city council, not anywhere else in government. I know that this was a foundational reason for why my personal hero, John Liu, ran for council in the first place. But in '97, a year after these statements were made, he lost to her. He didn't get elected to the council until 2001 when she was out of office and retiring. So I say this to note that the reason that I'd started in politics came out of a place of both anger at this former member, but also inspiration by John Liu. He and his team taught me a tremendous amount over the 10 years that I spent with them. And I owe everything that I know and I do to that team. Since that time, I'm glad to say that we've proven Julia Harrison wrong. During my career, I had a front row seat to all of the Asian firsts. I specialized just in campaigning and data management, field operations, stuff like that for just the campaign world. And in that way, I'm really proud that we've had trailblazers such as John Liu, Margaret Chin, Ron Kim, and now my wife, who is the first Korean council member in the history of our city. I think, though, there is still more work to do. There are some challenges that we face. As you have mentioned, Controller DiNapoli, this has been a very tough period for Asian Americans, especially in New York City. The height of the pandemic has exacerbated fears. the constant reporting on hate crimes has really driven even folks like my parents, who tend to be very calm and collected, into thinking twice about going outside, about leaving their little Korean enclave in Flushing and venturing to other parts of the city. They certainly won't ever take the subway again. There's a measure of public trust that needs to be restored, I think, between the Asian American community and the rest of our city. But the only way that we move past this is to move forward. I would really love to see Asian Americans encourage their children to enter public service, whether that be in electoral work, such as myself, in high-profile government positions, such as Kim, or in the nonprofit and business world, such as Anthony and Prisca. I think that representation will lend itself towards equity. That I agree with Prisca that we need to be in the room when these decisions are made. We need to cultivate leadership. We need to encourage public service and union membership. And then, of course, for my fellow Asian Americans throughout the city, as individuals, we need to get involved. We need to organize, and we need to agitate. We need to run campaigns. And nobody bats 1,000. Nobody wins every race unless you're Chuck Schumer. But that should not deter people from running, right? I think that I've always believed if people don't let you in the room, you break in, that you find a way to do it. I think that this event and the many others that the Comptroller's Office has hosted on behalf of the Asian American community is tremendous. And it goes a long way towards getting us to a place where Asian Americans feel as if they're not just established, but that they belong here. And ultimately, that's what I'm working toward. So when I'm organizing with our union, fighting for our workers, most of them, about 65% in New York City, are people of color. But I would love to see Asian Americans as a larger sample of that as well. We have a lot of work to do, but I'm really glad to spend time here and to be honored. Thank you so much, Controller DiNapoli.
Eugene, thank you so much for those very important words. And I always get the quote a little wrong, but as I think Prisca mentioned, also Black History Month, Shirley Chisholm said that if they don't give you a seat at the table, show up anyway with a folding chair and put your own seat there. And I think that's very much to your point. These have been great stories for us to share. Each of you have done so much in very different fields of endeavor. But before we close it out, I just wanted to reflect on one thing, and perhaps have each of you or any of you that would like to comment on it. One of the themes that seems pretty clear in each of your life stories has been the very strong influence of family, of parents, grandparents, the immigrant story. And I know that's not necessarily unique to the Asian community, but from my personal experience, it seems particularly powerful in the story of Asian Americans. For the newer generations, is that strength that comes from that family tradition, that respect for elders, is that still there? Is that challenged by the craziness of the modern world that we live in right now? I just throw that out as maybe a discussion point, because I think for each of you, that's like the first thing. It was the strength that you derive from your parents and grandparents that gave you the footing to be these incredibly successful professionals that each of you are. Anybody want to comment on that? Kevin?
I'll take a quick crack at it. It's just, I think, it's amazing what you just noticed. I think with immigrant families in general, the reliance on family is so strong that for us, when both my parents were working crazy hours and my sister and I were latchkey kids for a couple of years, we had our maternal grandmother come from Korea, and then she was our primary caretaker. So I think this concept of just family helping out family and 3-generational households, I think we learn kind of values, or immigrant families in general, I think learn values of just sacrifice, hard work, just resiliency. And I think those are values that we've brought to our professional and personal lives. I do find it interesting though, because now I have 2 young daughters, and I try to instill the same thing, and it's quite not the same. So I wonder if it's more to do with the immigrant family mentality of sticking together and really helping each other get through the tough times, or if there's a little bit more beyond it. But that's a challenge I find as a parent now.
Mhm. Anybody else want to weigh in or comment?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right there, Controller DiNapoli. Growing up, I always knew that in my family, it was family first, everything else second, right? And I think to speak to Kevin's experience, being a family of immigrants and being the son of immigrants myself, it always did feel like it was kind of the rest of the world against us, that in order to survive and maybe even thrive, if you can get there, you need to work 3 times as hard. We need to band together because nobody's really going to look out for us except ourselves and our own kin. I think it also belies a bit of a sadder kind of a point as well, that if there is a strong attempt at the government to be culturally competent, to increase language access, that in effect, if we see ourselves in leadership, then it would much less be a case of us versus them. It would be that, hey, this is our country too. That I think the family bonds will still be strong, but it would be coming from a different place. It wouldn't be coming out of necessity in a sense of being besieged. So that's kind of what I think about this.
Yeah. Prisca, Anthony, you want to weigh in?
Eugene just said something interesting. I think that this family first, that's how we grew up, right? It's just the family, and sort of, it's not like we didn't care about the outside world or the community, but it was really about the family. And what I think our parents didn't realize is that they were training the best public servants. They could, because they are training children to care so much about someone else. And I think that, what we probably should focus on is how to bring more Asian Americans to public service, because we, from a very young age, have been trained to think about our family and to think about others and not about ourselves. And I think for many reasons, we don't enter public service, a lot of it financial. So, creating access points for us, and then also cultural, because parents just want you to be stable and want you to be able to pay for health insurance. That is number one. So if we can take care of those types of things and bring more diversity into public service, I do think our society would be so much stronger, and I remain optimistic. We are a country of immigrants. We have everything in us. And what I love is meeting my immigrant friends who are, Italian American or African American. And there are so many sort of common themes, when you see your parents sacrifice for you, who came from a different country, and you have a front row seat to that sacrifice, I think that's the thing that bonds us all together.
Yeah, and I think all my colleagues here were very eloquent in their responses. I think for me, it's not only just about putting families first, but it's about where we draw our strength from. And I think for many of us, being a child of immigrant parents, a lot of our strength came from our parents. And when we were young, and I speak for myself, and I don't know if it's true for others, there was frustration at being different from everyone else. But looking back, I see that it was a strength as well. Being able to connect with our family and our community, I think really makes the entire city and the entire nation stronger, bringing these different cultures into the United States.
All important comments. I mean, my observation would be is, the grandchild of immigrants, as the years go by and next generations are removed from the immigrant generation, things get lost along the way. And I think the importance of, I felt privileged. I knew 3 of my 4 grandparents and 1 of my great-grandparents. And I've often commented that my great-grandmother didn't speak any English at all. We communicated, but it wasn't through any conversation. When I was growing up, we were not encouraged to maintain the language, right? We were Americans, right? So you had to speak English. You don't speak Italian at home. And I think it's very important. Well, first of all, on language, I think it's important for families to keep that understanding and to encourage the native tongue, because culture, very often to understand the culture, you need access through the language, right? And I think some of the more recent immigrant groups are better, at least in terms of my personal experience, just speaking for myself, of understanding that and maintaining that, and having, you know, whether it's neighborhood or community schools that encourage the youngest, especially those born here, to not lose track of what they're connected to. Because, you know, the other problem in America still is, and not, you know, not to attack the media gets attacked all the time, but it's always very convenient for groups of people to be portrayed in a certain way, often not in a flattering way. And I think every group has had this experience in varying degrees. And unless you have a strong sense of exactly who you are and where your people came from, you know, you're going to be affected by the stereotypes and by the negativity that's out there so often. So, I mean, I just think from my perspective, for your community and really for all the communities, the more that those of us that had the experience to know the immigrant generation, to share those stories, to document those stories, to be the witnesses for, you know, for those who may grow up not knowing the immigrant generation, not knowing the struggles, and just thinking that, you know, the success of the family just happened, you know, we were born into it. I mean, no, every family had their own struggles and their own story. And, you know, that's just my own reflection on you know, the challenges that are out there. And I do, you know, as I said, one of the takeaways that I've always appreciated from, you know, the Asian American families that I've known, the respect for the older members of the family, the respect for the elderly. Again, I'm not saying it's unique to your community, but it is particularly cherished. And you know, in American society, you know, certainly as I was growing up, everything was youth. And now that I'm not a youth anymore, I do think society is changing somewhat, but the respect and the deference and not leaving out the grandparents, the great grandparents, I just see that as such a strong trend in Asian American families. And that is something that the rest of us could certainly learn from. So we could go on and on, but I'm told I'm not allowed to. So let me just conclude on two things. First of all, thanks to each and every one of our honorees. You've been wonderful, and thank you for letting us spotlight you and sharing your personal stories and giving us a chance to dialogue. I really admire each and every one of you, and the variety of experiences that we've highlighted in this program really is quite remarkable. And I know each of you are going to have even more successes. So 10 years from now, we're going to have to honor you all over again for what you're going to do over the next decade. But I do want to mention one last responsibility of the State Controller's Office. And sometimes when people ask me what's the most fun part of our work, it's not always doing the audits, right? We do an audit, sometimes people aren't happy with us, but we are the custodian for lost money, abandoned property, unclaimed funds. And we try to reunite people and organizations with money that they've been separated from. And over the years, we've been returning millions of dollars. In fact, we return about $1.5 million a day, but we still have billions of dollars in unclaimed funds. During the pandemic, we redoubled our efforts to return money, especially because people were hurting. So I do encourage everyone, as always, to go to our website, click on unclaimed funds. Our website is www.osc, that's for Office State Controller, .state.ny.us. We also have a toll-free number that operates during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, 1-800-221-9311. You never know when you may be connected to one of these unclaimed fund accounts. So now you're all saying, why is Tom mentioning this in the middle of our Lunar New Year celebration? That's because we did a little search and we found Anthony Shih, the United Hospital Fund. We found $6,404.99 for the United Hospital Fund. So we present this virtual check to you. We'll send the paperwork out. And this is just an example of, as I always try to say to folks, we really do have money, and sometimes it's more than $50 or $100, which is the most typical recovery. But to United Hospital Fund, this will help you continue to do your good work. And again, we're just returning your money. There might have been some checks that weren't cashed, or perhaps an old bank account that for some reason just became dormant and got turned over to us. But See, Anthony, in case you had any doubts about accepting this honor, we just gave you over 6,000 reasons why it's good that you joined us.
Well, thank you very much. You know that the past 2 years has been an incredibly challenging time for nonprofits. So that will certainly help us continue to advance our mission. Thank you.
You are most welcome. So again, congratulations to all of our honorees. Thank you to all of our guests who've been viewing this program and joining us in our celebration of Lunar New Year. Today and every day, New York City, New York State, and our nation are strengthened by the energy, talent, and entrepreneurial spirit of the Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, the entire Pan-Asian community. So Gung Hei Fat Choi, happy Lunar New Year, Year of the Tiger. May it be a year of strength. I wish everyone prosperity and good health. Shih, thank you all very, very much.